We used AI tools to grow our prospecting agency to 3.6 million per year. In the process, we've tried a lot of tools, one of them being Clay.com, which is the single best platform that exists on the market right now. So today what we'll do is we'll discuss every single one feature that Clay has and rank them from S tier to D tier, and hopefully this will help you for your own prospecting efforts. So let's jump right in. Let's start with using AI models in a spreadsheet.
For me, this was like the big aha moment with Clay, because I was using ChatGPT, which is just one UI. And of course, there's APIs, but being able to take structured data in a spreadsheet format and pass those through AI and have variables within each prompt, and we'll show that in a second. For me, that was like, okay, this is something completely different. Like, I hadn't even thought of it before. So already I'm saying we're gonna rank this one highly. As you see here, we're getting all the information, in this case from our B2B, about our website visitor, which page they visited, the source, their first name, last name, full name, company name, job title, etc. But that's not enough information for us to figure out if we want to reach out to them. So that's why we have all this giant Clay table to figure out if they're worth reaching out to. And by the end of this video, we'll have gone through most of these enrichments in this table. When we first started using Clay, it was just ChatGPT, and so people were setting up their own custom integrations to integrate with like Claude and other models. Now they've since added every single mainstream model besides DeepSeek. So they've got Claude Anthropic right there, they've got Gemini, they have Perplexity, which is a personal favorite. So pretty much every big model is in Clay. And so just to quickly do that just a bit further, so you can type the prompt here, and they have their own web research model as well that's focused on scraping the web, but you can actually put in variables from each of these rows into the prompt. And so let's say I wanted to write a prompt that specifically analyzes their website. I could do /website here. And so, for example, I could refer to each row's unique website within the prompt. And that's how you get row specific AI prompts that give you different outputs each time. Let's say I have 1,000 rows, I can feed 1,000 slightly different prompts based on those variables into AI and get different answers and figure out all these different downstream use cases from there, but still using the same GPT. Just because it's in that spreadsheet format, you unlock a bunch of new possibilities.
For me, it's the fact that you can use AI on a lot of rows at the same time that makes it extremely powerful. Because once again, it's, for me, like the AI moment I had when I was using AI is that I used to have a team of assistants that would be looking at each row one by one. And I would be like, for each of them, just check the website and tell me if there is this information. Or I would be like, okay, for each of them, read the description and let me know if it's a B2B company or a B2C company. And then AI came, you had the ability to use AI on a lot of these. So it just meant that a team of 3-4 people that were doing this job just got replaced by AI, who was able to do it much faster than they do, right? So for this reason, I think I would rank it easily an S tier feature, actually.
I mean, the OpenAI team use Clay. If even they acknowledge how unique of a feature this is, I think personally it also deserves to be an S tier.
AI message personalization.
So to demo AI personalization for emails, it's worth noting like why we're doing this in the first place. Typically how you ideally start a cold email is with an observation. Show that you've done your research. It's about them, not you. The bad version of that is like this classic SDR example of, hey, I saw you went to this school. It's like a fake personalization. It's not related to your offer. So you can do this badly, but there is very good observations like, hey, saw you hit this milestone, and maybe if your product plays into that, then you can kind of relate that observation into your offer. That's why you might want to use AI, because those relations and taking a unique observation and making that personal isn't easy to do in like a templated fashion, which is why you might need AI. So in this case, we're feeding into this prompt, and as you see, we're just inputting the content of the post into this prompt and saying to write a first liner. This is a good one. Saw you recently posted a cannabis space opening on your LinkedIn. Great job making use of the platform, reaching out to recruiters in this case.
As a feature, it's pretty interesting that you can personalize the message based on some input. In this instance, we were using LinkedIn posts to feed the AI and to create some personalization. That said, I guess like the quality of the output relies a lot on the quality of the input, and sometimes it feels a bit not that relevant, in the sense that like it's a personalization that doesn't always have anything to do with the actual service or product you are selling. So because of this, personally, I think I would rank it a B probably. Would you agree with this?
B is fair, but I think you could make it an S tier feature if you do it right, and you could make it a D tier feature if you do it bad. So Clay actually has a recipe for finding 10K reports with Claygent. Shake Shack happened to visit our website, and so I found their 10K report here. So we have the link from Claygent, and so we're able to put that link into another Claygent prompt that analyzed the top annual initiatives of that year. I'm not going to bore you with the details. I think this is a good enough example to show how Claygent can go to a website, scrape something from the website, and then it still is a reasoning model, so it can also do things like go to that report and extract certain things from it. So I think it's a pretty good example of Claygent. What do you think?
I think it's a great one, especially because those 10K reports tend to be huge. And so it's like if you wanted to have a few people looking at this and then kind of finding out the best initiatives or like potential launch of new products, whatever it is, to take an insane amount of time. Being able to find the report and crunch all of this information is actually a game changer. And once again, this is one thing that Claygent can do. For this reason, I feel like it's my favorite feature by far. So I would rank it almost SS tier, especially because we've got the using AI model in spreadsheet, but we have on the S tier. What do you think?
Quick tip, if you use Claygent models, you'll spend Clay credits, which are very costly, which maybe we can talk about next. But you can use, for example, ChatGPT o3 Mini for Claygent, and it's going to cost you OpenAI API credits, and it won't cost you Clay credits. So it ends up being a bit cheaper. So just quick tip, if you are using Claygent, you probably can get away with just using OpenAI's model a lot of the time. So I agree. Yeah. S tier, super useful, use it in basically every single table. As for 10K reports, it's only for US public companies, and it's still not perfect at finding every single one, although it tends to be good. So for me, in terms of usefulness and like overall, I'm going to say C. I'm even considering D just because it's like for most companies are not reaching out to huge public enterprise companies.
It's a pretty niche use case, right? So I would place it at D as well. Not that it's bad, but just that it doesn't work for all kind of situations. So that said, you touched upon something interesting. You talked about Clay's credit-based pricing. So here, as you can see, we've got the pay annual price and the monthly price. And so, for example, here you can see that you actually have 10,000 credits for $349 per month. And here what you see is that it's 50K credits for 800 per month. So you have 5 times the credits for a bit over twice the price. So I feel like what's a bit tricky for people who have a lower budget is you will be paying some very expensive credits if you cannot afford to go for a larger plans. I kind of like the credit-based system, but I feel like what Clay does, despite allowing everyone to sign up on a self-serve motion, is it actually prices out companies that have smaller budgets. And so this is one thing. The second thing is that a lot of enrichment actions actually cost much more than 1 credit. So you would think that 10,000 credits, you can do a lot of stuff. But here, for example, if you look at the suggestions, I think the best example of this, let's pick Datagma as an example. And here we can see like it's 25 credits per row, meaning that if you were to find all phone numbers, you would have 400 phone numbers for $349 per month, which is pretty expensive, right?
The one advantage is that a big frustration I hear from a lot of execs is that like seat-based pricing doesn't make sense. As you hire people, if you want to give them software access, your expenses are increasing twofold, and credit-based pricing is in some way like outcome-based pricing. The other big frustration I hear from execs who are trying to use Clay is that they don't know what they're doing yet, and they end up just like wasting their entire month's plan of credits because they accidentally run a table. You could quite literally waste $350 in one click.
I kind of like that it's not seat-based, but I would still rank it C. What do you think?
I'm not upset with C. Honestly, it's a tough one to grade, so I think that's C.
Okay, let's go. So one thing we talked about when we were talking about the credit-based pricing is phone numbers. There are 2 ways, right? We can either use Waterfall Enrichment, which essentially uses 3 different providers to find the data. So the principle is you have email finder 1. If the first email finder doesn't find the data, it goes use the second one. The second one and the first one didn't find the data, it chooses a third one. We're going to demo it in a minute. And then you've got the find phone numbers and emails. Here, what we mean by this is that you've got access to a lot of providers. So if you have a favorite mobile provider in the US or in the EU, whatever it is, there is a high likelihood that you will find it within Clay.
So here, for example, we showed Datagma, but some of our favorite providers are Prospeo. So they provide emails and now phones as well. And so you can interact with Prospeo and Clay. You can interact with Full Enrich, which funny enough is its own waterfall provider. So Full Enrich on the back end, they have like 20 data providers. But then when you use their enrichment in Clay, you're accessing all those 20 data providers on the back end. So you can actually just run one Full Enrich column and you basically have a waterfall. The other good one we like is Lead Magic, and they do other enrichments as well, like verification. So it's a pretty useful API key as well to have to save on Clay credits. And so these all come together in these waterfalls. So if you just search up, like, for example, email, you have different waterfalls for personal email and work email, and they actually have different providers based on SMB or enterprise. So let's say SMB, it's going to automatically use all these different data providers. In this case, it will first look for lead magic. If it doesn't find lead magic, it's not going to charge you, and then it's going to look for it in find email. So in this table, we used Prospero first, then lead magic, then data email, then find email, and then Hunter.io. We're only running this if we didn't get the email from RB2B. And so a lot of companies will rely on, like, for example, Apollo's data or ZoomInfo data, and they just get a giant initial benefit just from taking all those contacts from those databases, running them through these waterfall providers, finding more emails than were on those databases, and then now they all of a sudden can reach out to more people, and that's like a massive value add.
And I think like here it shows how the waterfall works, because you see, for example, Prospero try to find the email, it couldn't find it, then Lead Magic goes and tries to find it, it doesn't find it, Datagma doesn't find it either, and then finally like the fourth one does find the email address. And something we see is that because you are using, say, 5, 6, 7 providers, the amount of email addresses you find, go from, say, 50% to over 80% of email addresses. I guess here we've got 3, because we've got Waterfall Enrichment, that's 1, finding phone numbers and emails, like using a lot of different providers, and then renting subscriptions you don't own, because what's happening is that you don't need a Prospero subscription to find data using Prospero. Let's start with Waterfall Enrichment. I wouldn't say it rivals the using AI models in spreadsheets or like the Claygent, but I think it's probably better than bad AI messaging personalization. So I would rank it A personally.
You could put it at S, but let's say because it's kind of commoditized, that's why we're putting it at A. I think that's fair.
Let's have it A. The next one, find phone numbers and emails. I think it's a great one. That said, if you use one single provider, it's not as powerful as all of them chained. So I guess I would put it at B.
Yeah, and it's kind of like we're not reinventing the wheel here. That's been around for a while. So I think B is like one of the reasons why Clay can replace some of your tech stack, but I wouldn't say that single feature is going to make anyone start learning all this and getting into tables. So I think B is fair.
Finally, we have rent subscriptions you don't own. Now, I guess this one is a bit different because here in this case, we talked Waterfall Enrichment, we talked finding phone numbers and emails. That said, renting subscriptions goes further than that because there are a lot of different tools. I think you've got the Crunchbase integration, the Build-with integration for technology filters. To me, it makes it an A.
For me, I'm between S and A, honestly, on this one.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Let's put it at A so that it's like every S feature is one that we have no dots. It's an S feature, but I guess it would be an A plus on this instance.
So let's put it first. Let's put it before Waterfall Enrichment.
Okay.
So find contacts by job title is one that in theory is very useful, but sneak peek, I'm going to rank it low here because it's no secret that Clay actually uses mix rank for this data. While I do end up using the Apollo one, the Clay one still is somewhat used at the company because it's just very convenient. So you can save the results in a new table or in this table. Let's just say in a new table, and then I can include the job titles that I want to find. The only problem with this is the data quality isn't amazing. It's a bit outdated. It doesn't reflect, like, for example, what's on LinkedIn right away. Sometimes you find people who've since moved companies, but in theory, taking a list of companies and easily finding people at those companies is great. I just find the Apollo data quality is a little bit better, but I'm sure Clay is trying to improve this. Personally, I'm not ranking this one too high, but in theory, it could be high. So the other one was Enrich Person and Company. So this is in the Enrich Person's case with their personal LinkedIn URL, and for Enrich Company's case, either the company LinkedIn URL or the company domain. And this finds all the information that you'd want, basically their LinkedIn profile. So in this case, we already have it in this workflow here. Let's take this example. Here we're finding their URL name, their summary from LinkedIn, their headline, their entire job experience, where they are in the world, their number of followers. You can even grab their picture, any volunteering experience, certifications. And then this kind of goes into Enrich Company here, where you're just putting in the company domain. You're also finding information about the company, what industry they're in, company description from LinkedIn. You also see when the data was last refreshed. Being able to just go from domain to in-depth company info is very useful. So I rate this one pretty highly.
And then the last one is TAM Sourcing. So obviously you can find companies, you can find people, you have access to a lot of data providers. So essentially, because you can unify all of these features, you can have like a pretty comprehensive sourcing of your TAM. This capability on its own, how would you rank it?
I rank that pretty highly because what a lot of companies, they have this issue where they don't know if they're reaching out to their total addressable market. In my opinion, the best way nowadays to figure that out is you take a giant company list that may be full of some unqualified companies, but then you use all these enrichments to find more information about them. You pass those through GPT lead scoring, which we can go into next, and you figure out who from that giant list of companies is actually worth being in like your ABM motion, your account-based marketing motion, and who's actually worth targeting and reaching out to. So So TAM sourcing, because it combines a lot of these, I'm ranking it slightly higher, but I'll
Okay.
let you.
So let's see. So finding contact by job title, like the principle is great, but the execution isn't that great. In my opinion, I would rank it a C.
Yeah. I mean, even D, if you rely on it, you're probably, but
Probably have some bad data, right?
yeah.
So let's put D, like just don't trust this enrichment blindly. Just make sure to double check it. Then we've got the enrich person and company. So we talk enriching company, but like the same idea with person. So you can get all of their data just through a one-click integration. I guess those two are pretty powerful. Likewise, the principle is great, but at the same time, the data is not always the greatest data. For this reason, I guess I would rank it as C.
I can't disagree there.
The last one, TAM sourcing. Once again, I feel like this is something that's highly dependent on your execution, right? How skilled you are at using Clay, at knowing who's the providers, and at knowing which of the providers will give you some accurate data. That said, I don't think there is a tool that makes it as well as Clay does. So I'm actually tempted to put it at S then.
You know, because I think these are individual features. TAM sourcing is kind of what you're able to achieve in Clay as you combine all the features. With all these things under one hood, you're able to TAM source extremely effectively. I still feel bad about putting find contacts by job title at D because it can be useful and it does help with TAM sourcing. But yeah, I'd say if we put TAM sourcing on S, maybe we're evening out our bit of a strict grade for those two. So let's put it at S.
Let's put it as S. Let's go. Okay, so the next one, which is kind of a joke, but not a complete joke.
I'll let you take this one because he's the master.
Getting likes on LinkedIn, and to be honest, like the reason why I actually placed this one, and maybe we could have separated getting likes on LinkedIn with getting leads on LinkedIn, is that in the very early days, and that's something that a lot of people do nowadays, like even today, is some people are showcasing Clay workflows, and they do make you look smart when you're showcasing some complex workflows. So that's actually a great way to acquire potential clients, and this is a way reserved in the early days because we were actually pretty early at using Clay. I could even go on my LinkedIn profile and I can look at all of the posts where I mentioned Clay, and you'd see that a lot of these posts got a lot of likes, views, and comments. So here, for example, like this is the concept of waterfall personalization. That's actually a post that I kind of stole from you then. This post that explains how we generate leads using Clay, and like this is actually showcasing a feature of Clay that we will showcase. Let's showcase it right after. Has 96,000 impressions. It's like when you get that many impressions, you do get leads. I guess the takeaway here is that it's actually great if you get good at the tool. Just showcasing how you are using the tool will have a great impact on your potential conversions. So that's it. Getting likes on LinkedIn, it's more a joke. If they don't translate to leads, I guess it's completely useless. So let's put it at D. That said, business-wise, if we were to replace get likes on LinkedIn by get leads on LinkedIn, you could put it at least at a solid B, because yeah, this actually had some great revenue implications on the business.
I will say 1 year ago, we were like one of few doing this, and now you'd be one of many because it's kind of like a overused strategy. I think thanks to you, I think you popularized it. So I definitely agree with D. It's lost a bit of allure, but honestly, it does make you look smart.
When we talked about getting likes on LinkedIn, we talked about the graph and we also talked about the formulas. So let's get these two. So viewing graph is pretty easy. So instead of having a table view, you can have a graph view. So here you just view the graph and you visualize it in a pretty nice way. It even has like this small animation, so you see kind of how this table works and what enrichments you have. I mean, in terms of visualization, I feel it's kind of nice. Now, in terms of how helpful it is, I don't think it's that helpful.
I mean, again, makes you look smart, makes you look like a true GTM engineer, but personally, I don't actually use it in my day-to-day, so it's kind of a vanity one. But honestly, like, they had to have added this. So great execution on it. It's just because the tables are so useful, I think the graph becomes less useful.
Yeah. So I guess it is good. I mean, D doesn't mean bad, right?
It just means less good.
Not as good as the rest, right? That said, there is an AI-powered formula. So I had made a post about it. I would actually love it if you could kind of show how you can create some of these conditional formulas, and then we can talk about where we rank this one.
So formulas can output data. They can also create conditionals on columns. You could say only run this column if this is true. they can also give a true or false statement in this case with this checkbox. So in this formula, you can add a formula just by going to any row and you can insert right, you can insert a formula. And then when you're in the formula menu, you just click use AI and that allows you to write the formula with AI. And so I'm saying I'll put a tick checkbox if the tier equals, this is a complicated one, but basically if the company is tier 1 or 2, I'm okay to have a tier 1, 2, or 3 prospect. But if the company is tier 3, I only want tier 1 and 2 prospects. And so it's kind of a complicated scenario, but with AI formulas, I'm able to just simplify that to a check or no check. And so I would probably never be able to write this myself, but I can prompt AI pretty effectively. And so that allows me to have, I think this is a theme in Clay. It gives you coder like GTM orchestration capabilities with not being a coder.
Yeah. And what I like as well is, the fact that once you've got the formula ready, it actually tells you what would be the output based on the formula. So you can actually check a few rows. And then if they are all correct, then you can just say, okay, the output is correct. You save the formula and now it's going to get applied to your whole table.
So for me personally, I'm going to go and say that's an S tier just because like, for example, I use Airtable a lot. Airtable's AI formula generator is so much worse than Clay's in my opinion. I love Clay's. I mean, sometimes you do need to go back and forth with it, but to me, it's like I use this all the time. It's unique. It doesn't cost Clay credits. For me, that's a S tier feature, but
nice. Let's go. Okay, I actually completely agree with you. I love this feature. The great thing, and you mentioned it, is it doesn't cost any credits. So you can actually leverage the AI within Clay to create complex formulas and you're not spending a dime. That's actually one of the rare actions that you can do within Clay without spending any credits.
And I think without even demoing anything, we can just kind of rate this one, orchestrate GTM workflows. So I think like taking your website visitors, enriching for information on them, validating that info, correcting any wrong info. So like finding new emails if you don't find one, researching the prospect, qualifying them for outreach. And then in this table, we're actually using Perplexity to research the company and suggesting campaign ideas. Like all of that together is super complex, but with Clay, you're able to do it under one hood.
Once again, it depends on how good are you at creating these GTM workflows. I feel it's some people like get lost in Clay in the sense that they just like geek out so much on the tool that they forget that the whole idea is that you're putting a message in front of a person and both these things have to be relevant. In terms of the execution, I think it's an S tier because there is a reason why it's the most used tool within the company. And it's also true, and this is their slogan, that any GTM ID you have, you can actually execute it within Clay. And so far, I feel this has been true for myself. So I think I would rank it at S.
Personally, I'm going to say we rank it at A because the difficulty, again, I've been using Clay for a year and a half now. It's not too difficult for me, but for new people trying to adopt the skill, I think it can be a bit daunting. So that's why, just from a difficulty perspective, I'd place it at A. But, I agree with S as well.
Okay, let's put it at A just because it is very powerful. Because it is complex, somehow it's two things that are difficult to separate. That said, I do agree that there is a learning curve and, a lot of people are struggling with it. One thing we talked about was moving CSV files. And that's related to orchestrating those GTM workflows. Personally, I think I would rank it at B because it's a huge lifesaver. And as I mentioned, you can now add contacts to campaigns without having to redo the whole process of moving the CSV around. But yeah, I mean, you could still do it with the CSV, it just takes more time. So I think it would be a good B in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, you get to a point like in my stage of Clay use where I hate CSVs and I just like always religiously avoid them. But at the same time, sometimes you need to use them. I don't think CSVs are like the ultimate enemy. So that's why I think B is fair there.
B is good, right?
So conditional formulas help you save credits. But at the same time, most tools like this, Clay competitors like DataBar and Persona, they have conditional formulas. Like it's an easy to implement feature, but it's also a very useful feature. You need it to save credits. Where does that leave us?
Yeah, I mean, the conditional formula is extremely helpful. That said, as you mentioned, it's just not the rarest feature. It will be difficult to create some complex workflows without it, but at the same time, what's most exciting is when you have those AI formulas being built for you. In this instance, it's the same ID, but you are doing it on your own. So I would rank them lower than AI-powered formulas. And at the same time, I feel like the AI-powered formulas allow you to create some very complex conditional ones. So I think I would place it at B personally.
It's a bit boring and C is a bit empty, so it could also be in C, but if we're being honest, is B.
Yeah.
Probably.
Okay, so now then let's talk about filters. Filter is nothing special, I guess. It's something that you have in most platforms, but the whole idea, and maybe you can show it pretty quickly, is that it can present the information based on some filters.
So we are actually cold calling these website visitors, and so we have a filter here for like who we want to cold call to. So that's just like an easy use case of, we have in this case 9,500 rows. We're only interested in the people who we want to cold call, which is only 1276. So now we can use Clay as an actual spreadsheet. It kind of plays into conditionals as well, because rows will only run in the filtered view, and so you can save on credits by creating conditional formulas, but also just by creating a filtered view. So I'm going to rank it next to conditionals. I mean, we're going to have a pretty big B tier, but that's to be expected.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it as is.
Yeah, I think it's fine this way. Okay, now another one that's actually a very popular intent signal, as in finding job openings from target companies. It used to be an innovation back in the days because people were like, how did you know I had that many open jobs? And then it kind of became, say, probably the most overused intent signal. That said, and maybe you can showcase it quickly.
So while Mish shows this, you can either open this up from individual providers like Predict Leads or Google or Company People Jobs. I don't like the Google one because it doesn't give you the job description. Or you can use their waterfall. I typically put Google last.
Okay.
You can also find these from the company's website, which is like a recipe they have. To be honest, as overused as it is, I still use it all the time. So when I'm building out an ABM motion for a big company, this is always one that they want in their CRM. Like they might not want to use it as the personalization for all outbound because it is overused. But if I was looking at a company, it's one of the first things I'd want to know about them is like, are they hiring for a job adjacent to the problem I solve?
So yeah, I think once again, I guess the B is gonna be huge, but in my opinion, I guess it's a good B because on one hand, it is kind of overused. On the other hand, it does give you some very interesting information if you know how to leverage it. But at the same time, they've got some providers that don't give you the most precise information. So I think I have had the experience where in some campaigns, people were like, that's not true, I'm not hiring. Or I was like, oh, actually, I did find the data in Clay, and sometimes it's a bit outdated. So yes, actually, maybe I would put it at C for it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you could also like, find it from their website, which is always going to be true, but then like it requires some additional fiddling. B or C. If we're putting it C, I'm putting it high C. So I'm okay with both.
Let's have it. We know for ourselves it's a high C. Okay, it's the first of the C. I guess like the next one is sharing as a template. I guess this one is interesting because it serves as a good lead generation mechanism. So I think for us, because we've created so many tables, we sometimes have some beginners that want to learn from us. And one of the best ways for them to learn is to study how a table has been built, right? But before being able to share those tables as templates, you kind of needed to be looking at some walkthrough video and then try to imitate how the table looks like. You can simply click on action, share as templates, and then you can turn on the sharing, and now you have a link that you can share to anyone, and people will be able to see exactly how you built your table. I think it's very interesting in terms of collaboration. I think in terms of execution, it's weird because when you do look at the table, it only showcases one row. So sometimes just one row is a bit complicated to understand, but I find it to be a pretty cool feature.
I'm going to put it C. It's like, it's a needed feature, but I think in actuality, people don't tend to learn that way, and people are almost better off like building their own tables themselves. I think you learn the logic better and you can orchestrate the table a little bit better. But then, Clay tried to solve that problem of templates being a bit hard to piece together by these Claybooks, where they're usually attached to an influencer. And it's kind of like, this is one of my favorite plays to do in Clay. And I think also cool in theory, but what are your thoughts on the execution in Claybooks?
Yeah, so let's put the shortest template as C because I actually agree with you. And yeah, Claybooks, for context, is essentially you have a lot of, say, Clay users that will be sharing kind of the way they've been using Clay, and they do this for some very specific use cases, right? So for example, you can see, here you can turn Google Maps listing into a target account list. This is Eric Nowosowski, who we know is a great Clay user. In terms of the ID, I think it's great. I just feel like not that many people are just looking at it, because just the way it's shown is a bit weird to me. Like, I don't find it visual enough. It just doesn't make me want to stay on the page and look at each of these different Claybook. For this reason, I kind of like the idea. I feel they could have done it better. So I would rank it a C personally.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who uses Clay a lot, I never use Claybooks. Again, great idea. And Clay team, you're doing the right things there. But personally, because I don't use it, I'm going to even say D, but that's just me.
Yeesh, okay, I'm okay for D.
That being said, recipes. So just to show you exactly what a recipe is, like for example, the 10K report that we showed earlier is a recipe. So for stuff that doesn't belong in its own enrichment, Clay have created these recipes, which are basically like pre-made templates. And there's also some that are like a sequence of tools. Yeah, so there's some recipes that you can find just by search. And then if you go to templates here, you can find more recipes. I think this is like the more user-friendly version of it. And it's like you have a specific function, you search in the enrichment menu and you get some recipes for it. And then it's also a way for them to integrate some tools that they don't have the time to do the native integration yet. Yeah, they did add bounce band, for example. That's like a good catch-all verifier. And they didn't have the time to do a proper integration for it, but they just created that template for it. So template recipe, for me, that's kind of like the more user-friendly way to kind of do the Claybook thing.
Yeah.
So for me, recipes, I think it belongs in B probably.
I agreed. It does belong in B.
Just to quickly show, bounce band is the one that we use basically in every table. So because they don't have that native Clay integration, we're using the bounce band endpoint, and I'm not going to show our API key here, but we're just feeding the email into it to get the bounce band verification status from it. One of the partners I call IQ Fivos, who's also our head of growth, he has a friend who's a coder, an engineer, and he uses Clay like unlike anyone I've ever seen. Like his entire table is HTTP API, and it's like I don't even follow what's happening, but because he's a coder, he's able to just use creditless Clay in the most complicated fashion possible, just because it allows you to, he says it's like Clay's a preferred interface to do like automations versus Zapier because he's so savvy with APIs and stuff. So for me, like that's kind of, you give Clay to a coder with this HTTP API stuff and they're able to make magic happen. So that's probably why I'm putting it at A personally, just because like it opens the world up if you know how to, do API stuff.
Yeah, once again, I think it's extremely powerful, but from my own experience, these one of the easiest to set up. So every time I would set them up, I would never manage to get them right on the first try. So extremely powerful, but a bit complex. That said, the reason why it's a bit complex is because it has this flexibility where if Clay doesn't have the data, then you can add it on your own. So I would tend to agree with A personally. Another great use case of Clay is lead scoring / lead qualification. I guess you're actually showcasing a campaign then that was our website visitor identification campaign. And one thing that happens, because we have 28,000 people visiting our website every month as of February, we have this tool. We actually have several tools, such as instantly B2B vector that de-anonymize our website visitors. And then what we do within Clay is we then qualify these leads because we don't want to be talking to just everyone visiting our website, right? And so one way to score and qualify these leads at scale is by leveraging GPT/AI for lead scoring. Would you be able to kind of show how that looks like, and then we can rank the feature?
Yeah, so, we talked about enrich person, enrich profile. We didn't talk about perplexity, but it does play into this. Like all this data, what's one great takeaway you can do from it? You can prioritize certain leads, prioritize certain accounts. That can also define like what you want to do. For example, tier 1, you might want to do a targeted ABM LinkedIn ads campaign. You might want to manually prospect them only. So as you see, all these different data points we're feeding into this prompt, and then we're using AI to basically make sense of it. And I think like that's kind of why using AI in a spreadsheet, you're able to get this crazy new use cases of AI, because now on each row I have like 10 different unique data points, and then systematically I can feed them through another AI to make sense of all that. In this case, tiering companies and people in tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. That's kind of like my Clay specialty right now, is creating ABM motions, helping bigger companies prioritize which accounts to reach out to, which actions to take on certain accounts, where to have their reps focus their efforts. So, personally, I love this one. But it's been around, right? There's tools like MadKudu that do lead scoring, AI lead scoring, KeyPlay is another good one. And in fact, the output from those tools might be better than what I'm doing here just with GPT and these enrichments.
Yeah.
But it's very, very powerful. So I'm a fan of this one. What are your thoughts?
Personally, I rank it pretty high just because it plays into the whole workflow, right? So you mentioned some of the tools. Those tools sound great, but then how would you do the lead scoring part without having to kind of re-upload and download some files and then like putting them back in your workflow tool, right? So in my opinion, it's a great feature. Once again, as with most great features from Clay, there is this complexity element that makes it difficult to rank as an S. So I feel for me it would be an A.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, AI messaging personalization, we ranked it a B because of how difficult it is to maybe get it right, which I think is the same thing with GPT for lead scoring. There's also the score row in Clay, and I'm just going to quickly knock this one out.
Yeah.
There is a way to score in Clay, and this is actually creditless based on like certain parameters fulfilling certain criteria. So the reason I think we should compare these is because AI is able to be a bit more nuanced and kind of like, make some decisions, do some reasoning. Whereas this is like you decide the amount of scoring criteria and then you set like, if this equals this or this contains this or this is between this, give it this much score. And so that's even more complicated to set up, but it won't make mistakes within those parameters. So I think these are two different ways to score in Clay. I think we should rank them both at the same time. For me, GPT is kind of easier to set up. It does more reasoning. So I'm happy to rank that at A if we rank this one maybe in B or even C, just because, is super strict parameterized lead scoring even the way to do it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like the only difference I would say, because you mentioned this AI messaging personalization, is that the personalization is often a gimmick, right? It's depending on the data you use, then the output will be irrelevant or completely irrelevant, right? While qualification means refining the data, and I feel as with any outbound campaigns, it's data first, and then you've got the rest that just naturally flows in. So any kind of efforts that's put towards having the best data available will, in my opinion, trump any effort that's about how can I grab attention in the best possible way, even at the cost of being potentially superficial, right? So for this reason, I would put the Leverage GPT for lead scoring as an A. And to your point, the score row in Clay is not as powerful, so I would put it as a B.
Okay, we've got a fat beat here, but maybe next time we fill out the bottom of the tier list a bit more. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Thanks for listening to us so far. We actually didn't anticipate that there would be so many features to rank. Let us know in the comments if you want to have the part 2 so that we can rank the remaining half of features we didn't rank. In the meantime, you can find us on LinkedIn, Dan Rosenthal, who's partner and head of go-to-market at CodeLikeYou, Michel Liben, CEO at CodeLikeYou. If you want to learn how we run this process, we actually have a mini course that just costs $1 where we showcase some of our best GTM workflows as well as some campaigns being built live, and you'll have access to a lot of other resources.
Thank you guys for listening. I know this was a long one. Hopefully it was interesting, and hopefully you're learning Clay as we kind of speak about these features. And that's kind of the point of this video, is as we rank them, you can also know about like what to care about, what to value next. So if you do want to see that part 2, that's going to be posted on my channel in the description. So let me know if you want to see that, and we'll be more inclined to record it.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice one.
See you.
Ciao.